The Venezuela Toda campaign command highlighted the importance of carrying out the electoral simulation in view of the consultative referendum in defense of the Essequibo. In Panama, President Laurentino Cortizo informed the nation that the executive has already received a first payment for the mining contract. In Italy, workers go on national strike to demand their labor rights as well as a tax reform. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. The Venezuela Toda campaign command highlighted the importance of carrying out the electoral simulation in view of the consultative referendum in defense of the Essequibo. The national head of the Venezuela Toda campaign, Jorge Rodriguez, highlighted the commitment of the men and women of different organizations that joined in the defense of the Essequibo territory. Rodriguez emphasized that the campaign resulted in national unity, where all the sectors have put aside politics to fight and defend the attacks of the Guyana government. Jorge Rodriguez detailed that for this drill, at least 800 voting centers will operate at a national level so that the Venezuelan people start to familiarize themselves with the voting process. The simulation will also serve as an act of patriotism.
We would like this Sunday's act to be a beautiful one, a civic act, an act of encounter with what will be the electoral meeting next Sunday, December the 3rd. That we all go with our families, our friends, with our loved ones, with our colleagues from our parties or social movements, religious movements, to get familiar with the voting system, to see how the voting process is, and also to prepare ourselves perfectly for what has to be the struggle of all of us, so that they do not steal a territory that belongs to us.
The National Electoral Council of Venezuela informed that the Supreme Court of Justice declared competent the writ of protection in defense of the consultative referendum by unanimous decision. Furthermore, the document states that Venezuela will continue to exercise its sovereignty and territorial integrity as an independent nation. Likewise, the constitutional injunction orders to continue with the fulfillment of the schedule of the consultative referendum. The Electoral Council also indicated that 90% of the polling stations for the November 19 simulation are already installed.
Among the bodies of public power, of course, is the National Electoral Council. The electoral power, which unanimously accepts this sovereign decision of the Constitutional Chamber of the Supreme Court of Justice.
The president of the National Electoral Council, Elvis Amoroso, emphasized that the document admitted specifies that the Geneva Agreement is the only valid international instrument for a peaceful resolution of the dispute with Guyana over the territory of Essequibo.
The law approving the Geneva Agreement of February the 17th, 1966, published in Official Gazette number 28008 of April the 15th, 1966, is the only valid instrument of international law to reach a peaceful resolution of this territorial dispute between the Cooperative Republic of Guyana and the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
Citizens of Venezuela remain mobilized in defense of the Essequibo territory in view of the consultative referendum on December 3rd. In response to the call for national unity made by the Bolivarian government, the People's Power organized mobilizations throughout the country to spread the questions of the consultative referendum. Hundreds of people took to the streets of the state of Falcón in western Venezuela in the company of the authorities of that region under the slogan, Essequibo is ours. Leaders of the United Socialist Party of Venezuela were present to reaffirm, together with the people, the nationalist mood of the struggle for the territory and urged the attendants to participate massively in a popular consultation on December 3rd in order to continue with the actions and the diplomacy of peace.
What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Commander Chavez and President Nicolás Maduro have carried out a diplomatic agenda of strength, of persistence, of peace diplomacy, but Always, always, always putting the interests of our country first. Always.
In Panama, President Laurentino Cortizo informed the nation that the executive has already received a first payment for the mining contract. The organizations reacted to his announcement. The head of the state promised that his office would abide by the decision of the highest court of justice on the constitutionality of the mining contract. However, the executive announced it had already received from the Canadian company $564,840,543 US dollars that will be placed in a restricted account of the National Bank of Panama. The payment corresponds to the period that goes from December 2021 to October 2023. According to the contract established by Law 406 last month, which sparked the social outcry rejecting the mining exploitation. The unions and social organizations expressed their rejection to the presidential announcements and promised to stay on the streets. The National Assembly in Ecuador has been reinstated this Friday, where some 137 Assembly members will begin their legislative term until May 2025. The opening session was headed by Assembly member Pereira Correta for having led the list of the most voted political movement with the Citizens Revolution Party. The premises of the legislative body in downtown Quito were closed to facilitate the access of participants and vehicles. The National Assembly was dissolved by former President Guillermo Lasso, who also shortened his own mandate by avoiding an impeachment trial which sought his removal. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the south. Gaza faces the threat of starvation and disease after aid deliveries were halted by a lack of fuel and a communications blackout, humanitarian agencies have warned. Aid deliveries into the enclave have been suspended again as Israel continues to restrict fuel supplies. The United Nations World Food Programme said on Friday that civilians face the immediate possibility of starvation. Furthermore, Palestinian telecommunications companies Jawal and Paltel said on Thursday that their networks went out of service after they ran out of fuel. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization said it was very worried about the spread of disease in Gaza, citing more than 70,000 reported cases of acute respiratory infections and at least 44,000 cases of diarrhea. In Gaza, Israel's war against the health centers seems unstoppable. While holding almost 5,000 hostages in the largest hospital in Gaza, the Al-Shifa, it now begins a new siege in the IBN Sina hospital in Jenin. This is the second time that the Zionist forces attacked this health center. The argument remains the same as the ones they have used in the past attacks to other health centers. They claim to be looking for Hamas tunnels and command posts. The result has also been the same. The IDF have still not been able to fabricate solid evidence that certifies the use of these facilities by Hamas as a command post or hiding place for hostages. The General Director of the Ministry of Health in Jenin confirmed that the assault of the genocidal troops claimed the lives of 2 Palestinian cities. 2 homes east of Khan Yunis were hit by Israeli strikes late Thursday and early Friday. The attack late Thursday killed 11 members of a family that had fled the main combat zone in Gaza City. On Friday, 35 people were killed in Khan Yunis and Rafah, which is farther south, said Mohammed Sakut, an official with the Health Ministry of Gaza. Dead and wounded from the Friday's strike, including babies and young children, were brought to the hospital. Over 1.5 million people in Gaza are estimated to be internally displaced, including about 778,000 internally displaced people who are staying in at least 154 UNRWA shelters. Jordan confirmed on Thursday that it would not close the energy and water exchange agreement with Israel due to the Zionist operation against the Gaza Strip. Ayman al-Safadi, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Jordan, reported that an agreement to exchange solar energy for desalinated water will not be signed. The agreement should be carried out in the month of October, but al-Safadi pointed out that no minister from Jordan can sit next to an Israeli minister to sign an agreement while they are killing civilian population in Gaza. The Minister of Foreign Affairs went further and assured that they will not hesitate to definitely cancel the Israeli-Jordan agreement and do everything that is in their hands to help their brothers from Gaza. The UN Security Council approved a resolution aimed at establishing temporary ceasefires and extended humanitarian corridors throughout the Gaza Strip, a decision that the Zionist occupation entity, in a blatant violation of international law, announced it will not comply with and that it will continue its war against the Palestinian enclave. Our correspondent Hisham Wanus with the story.
The draft, prepared by Malta, received 12 votes in favor, none against, and 3 abstentions from Russia, the United Kingdom, and the United States. A document that Palestinian permanent representative to the United Nations criticized as it focuses on the immediate release of all Israeli hostages and the urgent and expanded creation of humanitarian process and corridors without calling for a permanent ceasefire, condemning the brutal Israeli bombardment, or urging the immediate release of thousands of Palestinian prisoners in jails in the occupied territories.
This resolution shows that the so-called world community does not exist, and neither does the United Nations organizations, and there is not even the human rights, because this decision does not condemn the Israeli massacres against our brothers in Gaza, made us lose faith in the whole world, in the light after the slaughter that slips the blood of our fellow countrymen, knowing that no one in the world could act and take strong decision to stop the shedding of Palestinian blood in occupied Palestine.
In rejection of this resolution, the occupation troops continue their indiscriminate bombardment of Gaza, even assaulting for the second time in less than 24 hours the Al-Shifa Health Complex, where in addition to destroying several sections and medical equipment, they killed 30 patients, including 3 premature babies, and detained 200 people. A blatant violation of international law and a war crime, whose perpetrators, the Palestinians and their allies in the resistance bloc, demand must be tried and punished by the International Criminal Court.
The Zionist occupying entity is an aggressive and usurping body, and it is imperative that all law-abiding people, both in Syria and throughout the Arab world, pursue this entity before the relevant courts, in particular the International Criminal Court, to prosecute and penalize it for immoral and inhuman violation of all international laws, norms and resolutions with the massacres it commits in occupied Palestine, particularly in Gaza.
Meanwhile, the so-called world community remains incapable of stopping the Israeli war of extermination against Gaza, a resounding failure of humanity in Palestine, denounced the Palestinians, who, in order to thwart Zionist plans to displace them from their lands by force, in addition to sticking to resistance, urged the world to press for the United Nations Security Council resolutions not to remain only on paper.
We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. If you want a short break, don't go away. Welcome back from the South. U.S. President Joe Biden and his Mexican counterpart Andrés Manuel López Obrador met Friday in San Francisco. The talks took place on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Regional Summit. According to the top U.S. diplomat for Latin America, Brian Nichols, the agenda of the two leaders included migration, cooperation to combat the scourge of fentanyl trafficking, and the strengthening of bilateral economic relations. These issues, together with the U.S.-Asian Pacific cooperation, promise to weigh heavily in next year's U.S. elections, in which Biden is seeking a second term. In Italy, workers go on national strike to demand their labor rights as well as a tax reform. Citizens assure that they are on the streets demonstrating to demand higher salaries and investment by the state in areas such as health, education, transportation, and fiscal and pension reform. In this way, the representative of the Italian General Confederation of Labor pointed out that they have been joined by the affiliated workers of the central regions, as well as by the employees of the public sector of the country. Finally, they announced that they will progressively paralyze activities at national level between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. local time on November 20th. In the Horn of Africa, thousands of families were forced to flee their homes because of severe flooding that put their lives and livelihoods at risk. According to a warning from the UN Refugee Agency, food, shelter, cooking utensils, blankets, clean water, and hygiene services are among the greatest needs. Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia report the greatest impact as continuous rains hit the region, following the longest and most severe drought on record, impacting millions of people. In Somalia, around more than 795,000 people were displaced from a population previously forced to flee conflict and drought. In Ecuador, an astounding new species of orchid was discovered in the teleSUR mountain range, which has not only been an important scientific discovery, but also a beacon of hope for the rich biodiversity of the Andes. Researchers from the Ecominga Foundation say they've discovered a new native species, the Lepanthes inis manzanoa. Discovered in the Manducriacu River Reserve in the teleSUR range, this new species was named after Ines Manzano, an Ecuadorian environmental activist and lawyer who worked and contributed to environmental laws and climate action in Ecuador. Lepanthes is one of the richest species within the subtribe Pleurothalidae, with more than 1,180 species distributed throughout the neotropics. Ecuador has more than 350 species of native Lepanthes, and the number is increasing every year. And we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our social medias on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. We now leave you with a video showing the reality of the Palestinian people after more than 1 month of Israeli siege and constant attacks on civilian infrastructure. For teleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.
هذا قدش على أسف